It's been a remarkable year in the news with shocking developments from the bitter debate over race and justice to the rise of a new terror threat in the Middle East. Today, we want to drill down to get some perspective on this year's biggest stories. And we begin with the year in politics that saw voters turn over Congress to Republicans while President Obama pushed the limits of executive action. Here to help us understand where we are and where we're headed, let's bring in our Sunday group. Jason Riley of the Wall Street Journal, Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief of USA Today, the Weekly Standard's Steve Hayes, and Bob Woodward from the Washington Post. The big story in politics this year, of course, was the Republican wave on Election Day. The GOP picked up 9 seats in the Senate and will now have a 54-46 majority. In the House, the GOP picked up 13 seats, the new balance of power, 247 Republicans, 188 Democrats. The question for President Obama and new Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is how will they handle the new reality?
I intend to continue to do what I've been doing, which is where I see a big problem and the opportunity to help the American people, and it is within my lawful authority to provide that help, I'm going to do it.
The American people have spoken. They've given us divided government. The question for both the President and for the Speaker and myself and our members is, what are you going to do with it?
Jason, what do you expect in 2015? Do you expect the President to continue to act on his own, or do you expect some real bipartisan compromise with the Republican Congress?
Probably a little bit more of the latter. I'm optimistic, Chris. I think that Republicans are going to try and use their majority to show voters that they can govern. They want to put legislation in front of the President, whether it's immigration reform, tax reform, maybe even health care reform. Whether the President signs it is another matter. But gone are the days when Harry Reid can stop the President from having even to consider difficult legislation.
When you look back at the President's actions, executive actions this year, it's a pretty remarkable list. Let's put it up on the screen. An order raising the minimum wage for federal workers, a climate deal with China on carbon emissions, shielding 5 million illegal immigrants from deportation, resuming diplomatic relations with Cuba. Susan, how far do you expect the President to go on this wave of executive action? And at some point, will either Congress or the Supreme Court say enough?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Of those 4 things you list, 3 of them have happened in the past 8 weeks since the midterm elections, which were undeniably a rebuke of President Obama by voters. But since then, he has really demonstrated how powerful a lame duck president can be. And if the Republicans, I think that we'll see some pushback by Republicans in Congress, another effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act and so on. But they're in a box, it seems to me, because actions that they take that are at odds with President Obama, he's likely just to veto. So, it seems to me it's hard for them on some of these fronts to do much to curtail the powers that he's showing by executive order.
Steve, do you buy that as the new Republican majority in a box?
Yeah, I think it's difficult for the Republicans practically to do much to stop the President, although I disagree strongly with Jason. I'm not optimistic at all that either Republicans or the President are going to try to work together in any kind of a concerted way. I think you're going to have basically a year of the two parties and the two major ends of Pennsylvania Avenue talking past one another. The President's going to push forward with executive orders, do everything he possibly can, push the limits, maybe go beyond the limits, as I think he has in a couple of cases already. And Republicans are going to do everything they can to set forth an alternative agenda that they're not going to be able to do much with. I agree with you that they would like to make the President be the obstructionist. They would like the President to be, the party of no, the Democrats to be the party of no. Will it be covered that way? I'm not very optimistic.
Let me, before I get to you, Bob, ask you, Steve, about one potential flashpoint that I know that you've been covering, and that's Guantanamo, because this president seems very determined to do everything he can to close the prison at Guantanamo. It now holds 132 detainees. That's the fewest since President Bush opened the facility. Steve, how explosive if President Obama continues to go down this path?
Very, I think. And you'll see Republicans almost unanimous in their opposition to what the President does. But the group that I'll be watching is Democrats. Democrats in Congress, whatever moderate Democrats are left in Congress, do they support the President as he goes about emptying Guantanamo? I mean, there are reports that he wants to release or transfer another 3-4 dozen of the detainees who remain there, of the 150 some odd detainees who remain there to this day. The detainees who are there today are there for a reason. These are the worst of the worst that we've been hearing about.
Now, well, wait. Of the 132, I think about 68 have been cleared for release. One can argue whether they should be. But you're right, 64 of them have not been cleared for release, and those certainly are the worst of the worst.
Well, of those who have been cleared for release, it's important to understand what happened. There was the original Guantanamo Joint Task Force, the intel analysts that made these assessments, high risk, medium risk, low risk in terms of transfers. Then the president impaneled a separate board which reviewed what the work of the intelligence professionals and recategorized a lot of these. And the president's board, which was made up, I think, lots of human rights lawyers, folks who were more sympathetic to emptying Guantanamo, not surprisingly, came to different conclusions than the intelligence.
But you're saying all of these are
cleared
high
for
risk.
release does not mean, you know, innocent or somebody who's not a risk.
Bob, you've been, and I had to sort of count this up, you've been covering Washington for more than 40 years now.
Yeah, people ask, what did I think of Grover Cleveland?
I get those questions too.
Yeah, not quite.
With the exception of Richard Nixon, who you did cover, we all know, have you ever seen a president act on his own, go off on his own to the degree that this president has?
Well, I don't think, I agree with Jason in terms of what's going on here and what might happen, and I would be optimistic. I think the issue this year that was hidden in plain sight and kind of snuck by was the deal on $1 trillion of spending, a deal between Obama and the Congress. And it worked. They didn't go to the brink. They didn't shut down the government. And I think both Obama and the Republicans see value in achieving some things. And, of course, when you achieve something, you have to give up something in divided government, and I think people are willing. So I think there will be steps here. On your question, you know, because Obama's declared, I'm doing all of these things, if you go back and look at all other presidents, they, without declaring them, just doing them, did lots of things through executive action. I don't think it's changed the dynamic. It is inevitably big news, but one of the little secrets that's not been much discussed is that Mitch McConnell is a deal maker. Now he's majority leader, and I think he can work with Obama, if not at least with Joe Biden.
That's right, Uncle Joe. I want to switch political subjects because it won't be long into 2015 before we start seeing candidates, and we've already started to see Jeb Bush talk about running for president in 2016. I want to put up the latest Real Clear Politics polls. This is the average of recent polls. Hillary Clinton continues on the Democratic side to swamp a possible Democratic field, including, yes, Senator Elizabeth Warren. Among Republicans, Jeb Bush has a small lead over Paul Ryan and Chris Christie in a field of 12 potential candidates. And I want to play clips for you of Bush on what it will take for a Republican to win the White House, and Clinton on whether it's important to have a woman president.
It matters because we have half the population that has given so much to building this country, to making it work, and of course I want to see a woman in the White House.
It has to be much more uplifting, much more positive, much more willing to, to be practical now in Washington world, lose the primary to win the general without violating your principles.
Susan, you are already on the campaign trail. How strong do you think Clinton and Jeb Bush are in their respective primary contests at this absurdly early day?
I think that Hillary Clinton is in a situation where she can cost herself the Democratic nomination, but no one else can cost it for her. It would take a decision on her part or a big error on her part for her not to be nominated by the Democrats. I don't think Jeb Bush is in nearly that same position on the Republican side. There's going to be a big field on the Republican side. There's going to be a debate about where the Republican Party stands going forward. I mean, he's got a strong position. His name is well known. Some of the antipathy toward the Bush name has faded over the past 8 years. Past 6 years. He'll be able to raise a lot of money, but so will some of these other contenders. And you'll see, I think, a powerful demonstration by Rand Paul, who's been maybe the most interesting new figure on the Republican scene, by Scott Walker. I think he has the potential to be formidable. So I would see a big fight on the Republican side, but on the Democratic side, it's all up to Hillary.
30 seconds left, Jason, in the political panel. How solid is Hillary Clinton at this point? Is she still just cruising to this nomination?
I think that the Democratic side of this could look a lot different in 6 months. I think you could see names like Jerry Brown, the governor of California, enter the mix. I'm not sure Hillary is sure she's going to run yet. So I don't know if she's if it's baked in the cake for Hillary. I really don't think she's made up her mind at this point, and I know that there are others chomping at the bit, not just Elizabeth Warren.
Well, as the host of a Sunday talk show, all we hope for is a good race in both sides.